Hi everyone. Today we are going to talk about how to use secondary sources. As you may already know, you will need to write a final paper, but as I promised, it will be a easy task and it will be open-ended. So you don't really have to talk about to analyze your sources in great detail like you did in the first paper and like you will do in the second paper, but it will be a general overview of this course. So in the third and final paper of this semester, you will need to use not only primary sources from perspective, that is the source book, but also you will need to introduce some necessary uh, secondary sources to support your arguments in the paper. So that's why we need to have today's section to talk about secondary sources and how to use them, how to find them. Uh, so let's start. Um, so here, for secondary sources, there are multiple types of secondary sources. Um, and mostly you will have, in your paper you will have to use academic journals, those articles, and also monographs perhaps. And in terms of primary sources, as you have already learned from this course so far this semester, there are lots of like police records, court cases, newspaper, diaries and correspondence, personal or among those companies, among those kings and queens, and maybe also some love letter like Ablah, between Ablah and his lover. We will have multiple types of primary sources, but for the paper for secondary sources, we mainly use academic journals. So where to access those journals, those articles in those journals? So here I personally recommend you to make use of the library website. Um, and I would also try to tell you how to use Google Scholars to find your paper. Um, so in terms of like using searching engine, what you want to do is to try to locate, for example, an author which is kind of famous in this field. For example, Professor Carol Symes, in terms of the medieval era of Europe, or maybe you can not search those papers by the name of the author, but by the topic, by the themes they address. So you can have those specific topic that you want to talk about in your paper. So, for example, the First Crusade, you can say, so if you're interested in the First Crusade, and you can just try type in the First Crusade, or maybe the Jewish communities in the First Crusade, like we will have later in this presentation. And when you are trying to search something, some articles or even some books on the internet, you want to make your keywords as narrow as possible. So you don't want to have those broad and too general keywords about your interests. So let's have some more like solid example. So for example, you can try to ask some larger, more general questions that you want to address in your paper. For example, the genealogy of the West, or the uses of Roman comparison in American history. This is kind of a famous example. For example, today or like recently in recent decades, people in America they like to talk about American imperialism globally, and also they want to talk about the decline of American authority around the globe. So they try to compare this trend to with the fall of Rome that we learned in the first half of this semester, and you can also try to search some particular aspect of the history that you are interested in. So, for example, you can try to search something like the Viking invasion, or the rise and fall of the Hellenistic world uh, before the Roman Republic. And if you want to um, locate an author, so for example, if you know an expert in a specific field, for example, again, Professor Carol Science, so you want to search the author's name and try to find the web page, personal web page of his or her university or institution, and you will normally have his or her CVs on website, and then you can just try to make use of the CV and try to locate those works like articles and books and maybe some conference papers, something like that, to let you locate something that you like to read. And when we are talking about secondary sources in your paper, it means you just want to have a book, an academic book, an academic article, or a monograph. It doesn't mean that you want to use book review. I mean, that's book reviews give you an opportunity to know a book in just a time-saving way, but it does not mean that you won't really want to quote a book review as a historical, but also secondary sources in your paper. And also, it doesn't mean, I mean, secondary sources. It doesn't mean textbook. Textbook is just a narrative provided by a certain group or by a certain author. So is a narrative is not secondary sources that you want to use in your own writing. And of course, you don't want to use Wikipedia. I mean, that's forbidden and not formal as well. And if you want to quote something from an article or from a book, not textbook though, you want to use those books that are or article that are published in the recent 20 years. I mean, it doesn't mean that some very classical works like those by Durkheim, those by, for example, Karl Marx, or those by Max Weber, for example, in sociology. I mean, those are great works, but you are not going to talk about those big problems in your final paper. What you're gonna do is that you need to locate the most recent works, and if you have multiple works published in the recent 20 years, you want to read the newest one first, and then the second newest one, and then at last the oldest one. Unless you really know that among those works, there are some the most famous ones. Then you really want to read them first before going to explore others. Okay? And then, for example, if we are going to search the First Crusade, if you are interested in the First Crusade, so for example, if in Google Scholar, you can just type in the First Crusade, and then you will have this page on your screen. Okay, and then you realize, for example, I mean, just an example. I'm not asking you that you really need to do that. For example, in the second entry, you find something like this: European Jewry and the First Crusade. Okay, that's the topic that you are interested in, but it seems that the book is kind of a little bit too old. It's not published in the recent 20 years. Nope, that's not so. what you want to do is to use Google Scholar to find um, those most recent books or articles published in the recent 20 years, but those works that are also in relation to this specific topic are the Jewish communities in the First Crusade, and also this specific book entitled European Jewry and the First Crusade. So what you're going to do, you want to click on the cited by 265. So you want to click on that, and then what you have is this page. So in this page, you will have all those works, articles, and books collected by Google Scholar. You will have all those works um, here that cite this book entitled European Jewry and the First Crusade in the content. And then you will know who cite this book and what kind of authors are also interested in addressing this topic in their works. So you will have the most recent ones like the medieval identity machines, or for example, rituals of childhood, Jewish acculturation in medieval Europe. So you will have all these different kinds of works talking directly or more or less directly uh, about this Jewish community's living experience, for example, in the First Crusade. And then sometimes those works they have some copyright issues, so you cannot directly download them from the website from Google Scholar. So what you're gonna do, you really want to read an article or read a book. I mean, mostly article. So if you really want to read an article which is not available on Google Scholar, then you want to go to the university's library websites. So here we go. On the website, that's the main page of the library. So in this website, you can see the easy search part here. So you just need to type in the title of the article or a book, for example. Then you just need to click on search, and then you can also search specifically books or articles or journals or even media, different kinds of media. So what you need to do is just type in the title of the work, and then you can have the results. I mean, the university has a amazing library, and the library's collection is massive. So for most cases, you will be able to find what you want to read, what you want to use uh, in the library website. So they also have solved the copyright issues, so you don't need to worry about that. And let's move to how to read a article. So when you try to read an article, first of all, I mean this is from the university library website, and I just make use of it. This chart, and so first of all, you want to read the abstract. I mean, an abstract means something, a summary, or let's say a editorial introduction, like what we have in the perspective, which is the sources book. So it's just like a summary, an editorial introduction to the article. It gives you an opportunity to quickly know what is going to be talked about in this article, and is from the author himself or herself. So it reviews a lot, and then you need to jump quickly to the conclusion, and then you want, because you want to really make sure the author is really talking about an issue. For example, again, the First Crusade and the Jewish community's sufferings and living experiences. So you want to jump to the conclusion and see what conclusion, what main arguments the author or authors uh, is is giving in this article, and then you really want to read the first paragraph of this article if you are interested in reading it. So remember what we have talked about at the very beginning of this semester, that you want to present your main ideas, main arguments in the very first paragraph of your article, first paragraphs. I mean, sometimes it can be multiple. That's in the introduction, because you want to present your main arguments in an upfront, straightforward way, so that your reader can easily understand what you really want to present here in your article. This applies to those articles written by scholars as well. So you really want to focus on the first paragraph or multiple paragraphs. In that case, the introduction section. And then if you are really want to if you really want to use this article in your paper as a secondary source, then you first if you have enough time, you can read the entire article. But if you don't and you want to do it quick, so you can read at least the first paragraph, the first sentence of every paragraph. That gives you a basic sense of the topic and of the main themes, and also the methodology of the author. Because this applies to our writing as well, because we need to uh, present those main arguments uh, in upfront in our introduction, and then in every following paragraphs we need to talk specifically about a sub-argument. So, this applies to those academic articles as well. So, you want to pay close attention not only to the first paragraph or the introduction of the article, but also the first sentence of every following paragraph in the body in the body of the article. And then the last step before start writing your own paper is that you need to gather and evaluate. Evaluation is important. Evaluation of your sources, of your evidence. So first of all, you need to think how to make use of your primary, if necessary. As you will see in the final paper prompt, your primary, and also I think that's more importantly, secondary sources. So how they can help you, how they can guide you through the writing process. And then when you're reading, sometimes I find your perspective book kind of clean, nothing on it. I assume you read the sources, but so if you read the source, you really want to take notes so that you won't forget what was in your mind. Okay, so you want to take notes. So just circle those key concepts. Try to write some comments on those examples and quotations, and try to underline those important parts. This is a healthy reading practice that you really want to use in your reading process. And then after gathering all those secondary, as well as primary sources, you want to have a summary. So just try to summarize all the ideas from your notes, from your comments on both primary and secondary sources, and then try to have a brainstorm thing. So try to know what themes or what topics that you really want to talk specifically in your own paper. And then always keep this in your mind when you're reading and when you're evaluating your sources. So that is how can these primary and secondary sources help me building my argument. So all those sources, they will be they work in combination, and they in combination guide you through the reading process and also through the building process. So you really want to have this in mind when you're reading and when you are doing the evaluation thing, and then you can start writing after all those process. Okay, I mean, this may sound a little bit ambiguous, I admit. So we will have a Q&A session, or let's say a review session or something. I will be doing an online streaming thing with you this week, and I will send out an email later uh, about specifically about this online streaming and like Q&A session with you. Okay, so much for today, and thank you for listening to my presentation.